Welcome, friends, to Amazing Facts. My name's Tony Scarpino, and today we have a spotlight session with a dear friend, Wayne Blakely. And we have a three-part session. And our first part today is called You Matter, You Belong, and You Are Loved. The second part we'll do is Hope, Redemption, Reconciliation, and Restoration. And finally, our third part is a test of our religious freedom. Our dear friend here with Wayne will be relating to the controversy surrounding Christianity and the woke culture of LGBTQ. And we'll be revealing, this is my favorite part, we'll be revealing that when Jesus and his word are discovered, lives change. Wayne, how are you?
I'm good, Tony. Thanks for having me. Grateful to be here.
It's, Know His Love Ministries. You've been in ministry now for 14 years.
Correct.
And you've come from a background of 40 years from the LGBTQ culture.
Right.
But I want to first say thank you for traveling and being here with us here at Amazing Facts for our spotlight. What was the beginnings of your life like, Wayne? Can we start there? Just start from the beginning. Let me know how it is.
Yeah, well, I guess that would be in my birth mother carrying me to term and talking to various relatives, insinuating to them that she wasn't going to be giving birth to anything other than a baby girl.
Okay, that seems odd.
Yeah, so there was no amniocentesis, no ultrasound, nothing, like today they can tell the gender of the child before they're born. And so when I was born, she was extremely disappointed. We were on an Air Force base in Oakland, California.
So let me ask you, Wayne. So what you're telling me, because of the technology today, it was like your mom was like potentially prophesying of it's a girl, it's a girl, it's a girl,
Exactly.
It's a girl. So when you are born,
it's like being rejected at birth.
Rejected at birth.
So, postpartum depression or rejection of the fact that she gave birth to a boy and didn't want a boy. I think that if she could have left the hospital without me, she would have. But there we are on the base, the Air Force base. So there
was no way
that wasn't going to happen.
That wasn't going to happen. Tell me a little bit about being born on the base and how your mom was.
Yeah, so my dad was obviously a career Air Forceman and gone all the time.
Right.
When he would come home from time to time, neighbors would say, hey, we're not sure that your wife is treating your son all right because, it appears like she's abusing him. And he thought that they were just being nosy neighbors and told them to mind their own business until he comes home one day and he finds my arm is in a cast. And he says, well, what happened? He asked my mom, what happened to Wayne?
Right.
And she said, oh, he has bursitis. Well, bursitis is something I might be getting along the age that I am today, certainly not as 2 years old.
Right.
But this would eventually reveal later on down the line that she had broken my arm in two different places.
Oh my word.
On two different occasions.
And she didn't take the approach of, he was playing, he fell. Went straight for that terminology, like you shared, was
right.
for
medical
for
condition.
later on, medical condition. Wayne, then what happens?
Well, my dad then sees I guess people weren't lying. Maybe I should reach out to my sisters and to my brother-in-law in San Diego. So I was passed around between aunts and uncles for 6 months, like 2 months in each home.
And nobody would take you.
Well, I had a nasty little temper.
That's where we were. Okay.
It's no wonder,
right?
Because of all the abuse and everything.
That's right.
But see, they had their own children, and so they were worried about the influence that I was having on these children. So this happened for 6 months.
Okay.
Until one of my uncles said, well, why don't we just send him back to his mom? Certainly she's over her postpartum depression by now. She'll want him.
Right.
So they did. They sent me back to my birth mother, and then the state got involved and said to my dad, remove him from the home within 30 days or we will. And so then my birth dad reached out again and said, hey, you guys, I'm not giving up my career. I need to do something with Wayne. Help me out.
Right.
So my Uncle Fred and my Aunt Virginia said, well, that's interesting. We've been praying about this. We don't want to see Wayne passed around.
Right.
And we've decided that if you'll let us, we would like to permanently adopt him.
Out of they've been watching and listening, and they decide we want Wayne as our own.
And to me, that was a miracle.
Perfect solution.
It wasn't a miracle at the moment
No,
that I noticed,
no.
but I would notice it, probably 40, 50 years later, because, that these parents, these new parents that I would have, had a relationship with Jesus Christ.
Right. So at this point, this is a perfect solution, and everything runs straight and true now. You're the perfect little boy.
Oh, absolutely.
You change. Everything is wonderful.
Yeah, except for here I am 3 years old and I'm running around the house screaming, I don't want to be a boy, I want to be a girl.
Wait, how does that happen?
Right. Well, let's go back to my birth mother.
Okay.
The influences that she had on me prenatally and the abuse that she had on me postnatally, why wouldn't I try to be the little girl that she desperately wanted in order to get the love that I desperately wanted from her?
Right. Oh.
So it was a bit of a nightmare for me and also for my new parents because they're not knowing what to do. Pastors couldn't tell them, school teachers couldn't tell them, psychologists didn't know. It was gender dysphoria before they even had a term for it.
Had a term for it. Believing God made a mistake. Tell me how this comes about.
Well, I start school and I start being teased and harassed at school because obviously I'm acting more like a girl than a boy. And in my mind, I couldn't see what the problem was. I didn't realize so much that it was a big deal. I mean, I wasn't going to school in dresses or anything,
Right.
but I was trying to fit in. I was trying to play sports. I was horrible at sports. I was hanging out with the girls, and I would get teased and bullied about it. And so I would come home from school, and I would go into our bathroom that had 2 doors on. I would lock both doors, and I would stand in front of the mirror, and I'd punch myself in the face, and I would yell at God, and I said, why? You made a mistake. I was supposed to be a girl, not a boy.
So this teasing is going on. Tell me more about what was going on
So
in
the
school.
teasing happened from grade 1 and it went all the way through the 12th grade. I came home from school nearly every day in tears and at times certainly wanting to commit suicide. By the time I go into my early years of high school and gym class, I hated going to gym class. The coach would have us jog through residential communities, and my classmates would come up and pull my gym shorts down and then laugh and, carry on about it. And then I would go home, miserable, saying, why do I have to go to school? I hate
Humiliated.
this. And this is...
So let me ask you, this is obviously a public school. All this is happening
No,
to you.
Tony, this is a Seventh-day Adventist private school.
Okay, now that's disturbing.
So, I think these things probably still happen today. Bullying happened long before the media started reporting on it.
Right.
But you would expect that in a Christian environment with other Christian kids, that nobody's going to tease anybody or harass anybody. But it's really weird and strange how the devil uses that to try to pry us away from our relationship with Jesus very early on in life.
Your relationship with your now aunt and uncle who have become your parents while you're living openly now as a...
Well, actually, I stuck with this. I didn't even know that there was such a thing as gay.
Okay.
I'm 18 years old. I'm working for Loma Linda University, and there was this flamboyant orderly that would come by. He was always making me laugh. I couldn't get enough of him. He was just hilarious. And
He was paying attention to you for the
and he
first time.
says one day, you should call my roommate. And I'm like, why would I call your roommate? And he says, just call him. So I call his roommate, and we're on the phone for probably 2 minutes. And he said, oh, you're gay, aren't you? And I said, gay. What is that?
Wow.
And he said, well, you like guys, don't you? And I said, well, it's kind of starting to look that way. I think so. I mean, I'm reading in the Bible at like 13 and I'm going, well, all these examples of homosexuality in the Bible are in a very negative connotation.
That's
so I sure hope that's not what I am, but I didn't ask to be this way. So my new friend, Glenn, that I meet, I go over to his place after I get off work,
Right.
and he gives me my first joint to smoke. And he's having this conversation with me, and we're laughing and carrying on. And I'm thinking, wow, I've never had anybody pay this much attention to me. Then he said something out of the blue. He said, well, Wayne, you know, Adventism breeds homosexuality. I said, wait a minute, what did you just say?
Right.
And he said, well, I said, how do you arrive at that conclusion? He said, well, you're gay, I'm gay. I go to La Sierra University with other gay guys. He says, the church has done a great job at telling us that homosexuality is sin. And that's the end of the conversation.
That's the end of the conversation.
And so it's like, wow, you know what? You're right. And so Glenn took me to my first gay bar, and I thought I had just walked into heaven.
Okay, so I know it for time's sake
Yeah.
that we have a lot to go through, but I just want you to know, Wayne, that I'm sorry that it happened, but I want to get to these other questions.
Sure.
And I just don't want to breeze over what had happened to you. What was your life now like? You know, a few years later, you're in the midst of this. What's happening?
Yes, so I spent 40 years looking for love, the love that really already existed, but I wasn't concentrating very much on Jesus. I was hung up with my own emotions and the trauma that had happened to me. And so I walk into the LGBT community thinking that that's where I'm going to find this love. And so, you know, I did have friends, but we pretty much partied. We didn't really talk about the real core of life. I ended up walking down a road of male prostitution for 12 years, looking for Mr. Right, but I would always end up with Mr. Right Now. And so I lost all my friends in the long run over those course of those years because AIDS showed up in 1980, 1981.
Right.
And I should be the one that ended up HIV positive, but I remain HIV negative, and all my friends end up passing away and dying. And one day I'm sitting in the comfort of my own bedroom, and I'm thinking, wow, I know the truth. I was raised on the truth. I know the Bible. And I looked up at God and I said, what do you want from me? And I seemed to get a direct response that says, I desire intimacy. And I thought, well, God has been courting me or trying to court me all my life.
Right.
But I haven't been courting him. And all of a sudden I thought, that's the antidote for homosexuality. To develop an intimate relationship with Jesus Christ. I thought I had hit a gold mine. It was like something just blew up in my head and was like, that's the solution.
At this point, were you happy in realizing this, or were you struggling through this?
It didn't all happen at once. You
Right.
know, I went to a Christian bookstore with my sister, and it ended up buying a copy of The Desire of Ages. And I thought, well, what was it like for Jesus? Let me just go down that road of finding out what life was for him and what he experienced. He experienced a lot of, you know, rejection, and I had experienced a lot of rejection. And yet I learned that whatever I went through, he'd gone through, you know, things that were far worse than I would ever see.
Right.
And he began to draw me into his presence. And then I began to see that he offered me this great gift of forgiveness for my sins, because here I've engaged with people, I've influenced them, I've drawn them into the LGBT culture. I haven't helped them get to know Jesus at all.
You mentioned to us that in considering this culture that you've been in, you had to go back to the beginning. What does that mean, to go back to the beginning?
Yeah, so I end up in a church, and
So you've been going through all of these things,
Yeah.
these acquaintance relationships, right? Things that happen now, not long term, and yet you now find yourself you're being courted by the Lord.
Yeah.
Jesus is courting you. You're reading His book, and now you have to go back to the beginning. What does that mean?
Well, I'm humbled, incredibly humbled in front of God. And so because of all that I had done, and I sought His forgiveness and realized that He paid for my sins with His life. And so then I began to sit there and think, how did I get into this mess? So I had to go back to the beginning. Let's go all the way back to war in heaven. What brought about the war in heaven? Actually, it was Lucifer saying that he didn't want to be just equal to Christ. He wanted to be better than Christ.
Right.
And then he begins to dispel all of this madness that he's got, this self-inflated opinion about himself and wanting to be higher than God. He begins to tell all the angels in heaven, hey, you guys, you're holy beings. You need to follow the dictates of your own will. And I'm
good.
going, well, that makes sense.
Right.
No wonder they got into this mess of being cast out of heaven. But Christ would have actually forgiven him if he would have sought forgiveness. But instead, he raises up this huge mystery of iniquity, takes a third of heaven with him.
Right.
And so what do you think that he and his angels are trying to do today? But to say, hey, you need to just follow your own will. Do what you want to do. Oh, God is archaic and unrelatable. Pay no attention to him.
Wow.
And at the same time, claim some kind of connection with him. Well, that wasn't going to work for me. I'm either all Christ or I'm all the enemies.
Right, that you've been spending those years. Keep on that track of what it meant to now find this Jesus. You're all for Jesus.
I'm all for Jesus. I call,
What does that look like?
I tell the pastor this. I go in and I have a conversation with him. Well, he hadn't counseled somebody that was LGBT before. And so he was really kind of like taken aback.
Yeah.
And so
We don't talk about that kind of stuff.
And it was rough. My reentry was really rough. I mean, he said, baptism's not graduation. And I'm going, well, okay, but I want to live for Jesus now. And I want to be baptized.
Right.
And so he finally agreed that he would baptize me. It was on my parents' 67th wedding anniversary. They had prayed for 40 years. And so, their knees were pretty raw from being on their knees and praying for me.
40 years of prayer.
Yeah. Parents today pray and they want to see results by tomorrow morning.
Microwave. Beep, beep, beep.
Come on.
Yeah.
And so, but re-entry into the church didn't mean that the same-sex attraction was just going to eviscerate and go away.
Right.
And so what do you do with that?
And please tell us. I have no idea.
Well, neither did there was
Nobody in the
outreach
church.
from the church. I come back in and I Google online and I look up gay and Adventist, thinking that there must be some outreach to gays.
That's right.
There's nothing.
Nothing.
40 years. Who else wandered around for 40 years?
That's a good number to talk
so,
about.
So I started speaking up, and my pastor, I think, wanted me to kind of silence, because I'm coming out of nowhere. And
Literally
I'm going,
coming out. Yeah.
You can't be, well, we don't have that problem in this church. Well, our church had 800 members. You can't tell me that there wasn't somebody else like myself that had been in the dark all this
You're not
time.
the only one. You spent 40 years in it.
Don't talk about these things.
Nobody talks about that.
So, we have, like all other churches, there's a main headquarters. We have a general conference who has had a statement on homosexuality for 150 years. But we still don't have a piece of paper that would show an LGBT person why they would come to Jesus Christ. And so there is an effort, and now I begin to realize why God maybe held his hand over me while I was going all these dead ends, because he was going to eventually reveal himself to me and use me to come into the church and say that there's hope for even those that you think are hopeless.
I want to go back to how did it come up with the name of the ministry? Tell me about Know His Love Ministry.
Well, I'm sitting there and everyone, pastors telling me, well, you might share your testimony, but probably not between, from 3 to 10 years from now. And I'm going, are you kidding me? I need to talk about this now. So, I can't see that I was really premature. Usually a baby Christian's supposed to, mature.
That's right.
But I'm like, nobody's talking about this. Somebody has got to talk about this. And so I sat down and I began to think about the web, and I thought I need a web presence, which is knowhisloveministries.org.
Yeah.
Not know, N-O, but K-N-O. You got to get to know Jesus. And so I thought, well, what is it about getting to know Jesus? And I'm thinking, you've got to know his love, because it's only his love that can bring change into your life. It has to be personalized for someone. You don't want to come back and be a checklist Christian and do what Christians tell you to do. You want to adopt a new identity that Jesus offers you
Right.
as a new creature in him,
Right.
2 Corinthians 5:17. So, but it took me a little bit longer before I adopted that identity. I was still trying to figure out who I was, but I knew that I needed to know the love of Jesus.
You needed to know the love of Jesus. Tell me also what intimacy means to you today
Yeah.
versus than it did in those 40
Right.
years.
So intimacy has a bad, reputation.
It sure does.
Because we think of it from a sexual way. And actually, you mentioned Mrs. Wright. She writes that we need to have intercourse with Christ.
Right.
And even when I started in ministry, people were like, wait, you shouldn't be saying that in church. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Getting to know Christ is the epitome of an intimate relationship. He wants us to become one with him. And I'm still on that journey today to become one with Christ, because there's an awful lot of effect that this world has had on us. And let's not forget that there's a great controversy and that the enemy is using everything he can to keep us in his camp. And it's not always obvious. He uses things that appeal to us, that we like, that
Yeah.
feel good, that taste good, and all
Right.
those things. And yet we don't always see the consequences of those things unless we engage in them, and then, like Eve, we experience the results.
Would you say you're a gay Christian today then? Is that kind of where we're heading with this, or no?
That would be a dual identity to me. I would have to be part of the gay culture and part of Christianity. And when you have two identities, it's going to be a tug of war. Only one can win in the end.
Can't serve two
And
masters.
so I believe to identify, so the Bible doesn't tell me that I'm gay.
Right.
The Bible tells me that I may have temptation. We
Right.
all have temptations.
Right.
But our temptations doesn't have to be our identity. Identity comes from who you've given your heart to. And I gave my heart to Jesus Christ. So I don't see myself as being gay. Same-sex attraction I struggle with. I give that over to Jesus Christ.
Right.
But I am a believer, a Christian, a child of God.
You give your sin over to Jesus.
Yeah, I'm not going to identify by it.
That's right. You're not going to identify. Dig into that a little
So
bit.
I don't want to identify by my past
Right.
or by my temptations.
Right. But in a world of addiction, let's just
Yeah.
say this is an addiction, you live off of that. So if somebody's watching today and they're trying to identify, like, they live off of fantasy. They live off of what they used to have.
Right.
Right? The athlete that was the
Well-
quarterback of the football team, and now he's 35 years old. He's not a quarterback. He lives off those
Right.
memories. But for you,
I don't want to live by those memories. It's a little bit like somebody who comes out of alcoholism.
Right.
And Bill Wilson did a great thing because the church wasn't doing it. Bill Wilson came up with a program to help people get sober.
right?
But you don't go into a meeting and identify as a sober person. You go in and you identify as an alcoholic.
Right.
You have a pendulum around your neck, and it's a constant reminder. But when you go into a church environment, when you go to the foot of the cross of Jesus Christ, he doesn't say, here comes my alcoholic son or daughter,
Right.
or here comes my gay son or daughter. He says, here comes my new creation in Christ. This is my new child. He believes, he trusts in me.
Wow. God gifted me with a new identity. Tell
Yep.
me about your new identity.
Yeah, as a new creation in
Yes,
Jesus Christ.
yes.
Yeah. So that's what I hold on today. That's what I offer anyone who would view this program. Even if you stumble and you fall through the process of reconciliation and,
Right.
and coming to Jesus and surrendering and giving your life to him and asking for forgiveness and genuine repentance, God awards you a new identity, this new creation
So
in him.
for the verse that says, for the man that falls 7 times.
Yeah. So that we might talk about that in the second. We
Good,
could use that
good.
as a teaser
That's
in
a
a
good
way
teaser, yeah.
because is life as a Christian without failure? Are certain failures worse than others? Are there Christians or Adventists or anyone from any denomination looking today at this program and going, oh, this guy has claimed that he's redeemed from homosexuality. He's on this perfect pedestal. You know, that's where we'll leave it. Aren't all the rest of us perfect?
So someone comes up to you right after the session and they say, hey, I've lived in this culture. Wayne, your story has captivated me. I have a similar story.
Yeah.
Or somebody that's in high school right now that doesn't know how to deal with this same-sex attraction, male or female. They want to get out of their lane and go into the same lane.
Yeah.
What could you say to them as we come to a close of this one, as we progress to the next session?
So I would say to somebody identifying as LGBT today and considering Jesus Christ,
Yeah.
get to the point where you're developing a relationship with Jesus. Build that intimacy with him. Are there things that Christ is going to have you drop off of your life and let go of? Yeah, I guarantee you, as you get to know him, you know, pray a prayer, a simple prayer, and say, Lord Jesus, I don't know about the Bible and homosexuality, but I do know that I love you and that I want you and I desire you. And so come into my life and make the changes that I can't make. And so when somebody comes to Christ, anybody, you will begin to find that you let go of a lot of your past. But Jesus will accentuate on the things that he wants to give you as gifts from him that will be part of this new identity.
Wayne, I'm astounded with your story, your journey, your 40 years, and now you're out witnessing, being a witness for Jesus, not just for someone that chose the LGBTQ, but it identifies for someone that's even a heterosexual that says, well, I don't have that situation, but I'm dealing with other things in my life, the pornography, the addiction to other things, and you address that through your story. Because for us, as we're listening, I'm like, well, I'm not like that guy, but I've got my own journey and story.
Let me quickly clarify that, you know, anyone listening that's LGBT is like, we didn't choose this, or they get really angry.
Yes.
And so, I have to clarify this all the time because I really am on your side. I want you to have value. I want you to experience love.
That's right.
But we don't always choose to be LGBT per se. We don't necessarily choose the temptation.
Right.
But we do choose to engage in the behavior. And by engaging in the behavior, that's when you become LGBT. That's when you become an alcoholic, because you start drinking when you're engaged with it.
Yep.
But to have just the attractions and to stay separate from it doesn't mean that you need to identify by it.
That's right. You're not holding that. Though the world will tell you, let it run with that.
Oh, yes.
So today, I think we've answered the question, or we found out that you matter, you belong, and you are loved.
Yeah.
As we finish this session, now we'll head on to the second session, and our next session is on hope, redemption, reconciliation, and restoration. Wayne, I love you. We've had many discussions and talks.
Yeah.
I love the fact that the only thing that I knew to do in saying thank you to you was to give you a man hug, just a bro hug. And what a difference that made for the both of us in trying to understand what is it intimacy like with Jesus, but not having the effects of that.
Yeah.
Wayne, thank you.
Thank you, Tony. It's been a pleasure being here.
Amen. God bless you. We'll see you at the next session. Thank you very much.